Okay, cool. So yeah, welcome to the Rust Meetup. I'm Jonathan. I'm the organizer of the Vancouver Rust Meetups. And yeah, I just wanted to do a quick little talk since it's going to be a relatively quiet month. Decembers tend to be that way. And just, show off a project that I've been working on for the last couple of months. So just going to share my screen now, if you don't mind. Okay, so the project that I'm working on is, it's called Tableturf Web or Tableturf Online. And basically, to give a bit of background, um, what Tableturf is this mini game that's part of the game Splatoon 3 that released on the Nintendo Switch a few months back. And essentially, that game is single player only right now. And uh, you have to pick up a bunch of like cards in game to even be able to like build a deck and play it. Um, and so I decided, I'm looking for a Rust project right now to work on. I don't really have anything big going on, and yeah, this I thought it would be fun to build a little simulator so you could, you know, play the game online against like an actual human opponent. Um, Use whatever cards are in the game without having to like, try and collect them in the actual game. Uh, and it was also kind of a opportunity for me to learn a bunch of um, tools and frameworks that I've never used before. So um, I don't do a ton of web development at all, I would say. Um, like I basically do like zero front end work. I haven't done front end work for at least like a year or so now. So yeah, um, just a quick explanation of what this game actually is. I have a screenshot of the game up right now. Basically, you draw from a deck of cards. I think it's, yeah, you get something like 15 cards in your deck, and basically you get 4 cards to choose from. They have these funny shapes on them, and you select a card and you just place it on the board. It has to be adjacent to any other squares that you already own. So every board will start with 2 squares, one that you own and one that the opponent owns, and then you basically just pick a card, you plop it on the board. It has to be adjacent either diagonally or I guess orthogonally to that to any square that you own, and then the goal is basically to have the most squares on the field. And so in this case, you can see that the yellow player is actually winning because they have, I think, 11 squares on the field, whereas the blue player is losing. Basically, both players will choose their cards and place them at the same time. So if there's conflict, sometimes these little walls can appear to show that there's like overlapping ink. And you cannot place any cards over top of any existing filled squares unless you use something called your special. So there's like a special meter. You can fill it up by surrounding these orange or like light blue squares. And yeah, you can basically spend special points to overlap or cover up your opponent's ink and try and gain more territory that way, and like push further into their territory. So yeah, it's a fairly simple game. Um, it's more intuitive once you actually like play it and like try it out. Um, but yeah, that's what Tableturf is. So the actual code for the project, I just want to quickly go over. Right now I just kind of have Vim open here with netrw. Um, and yeah, there are 3 major projects or within this repository that I have. So there's the backend project, there's the front end project, and then there's the common project. And essentially, when I was building this, I just followed a couple of tutorials. There was one from, I think, LogRocket that was about building like a backend using WebSockets. And then there was this other tutorial that was like a full stack uh, application tutorial in Rust using the U framework with WebSockets as well. So that's kind of been how I've structured the project, is kind of based on these tutorials. So yeah, what's in each of these is basically in the backend is obviously the server side logic. Well, I guess they're technically both servers, I guess, but this is a single page application. I decided to use WebAssembly for this because I realized that it's actually kind of nice to be able to reuse all of your types that you're kind of serializing and deserializing. And also, I wanted to try out the U framework as well. So yeah, that's basically what's going on here. The front end is using U. The common module or common subproject here just has the main game logic, so there's nothing super fancy here, and it also has like the messages that are kind of passed across the passed between the front end and the back end. So that's all just using CERD. And yeah, the back end handles things like matchmaking. What else? Yeah, it also has. Oh yeah, it also has like the WebSockets stuff here too. It creates this. I call them games. They're basically rooms for like players to join, and then they get stored in a map. But yeah, anyway, I'll talk about that in a bit. So yeah, first I wanted to go over the stuff in the common module, or sorry, not module, it's a project. I always get this confused. So yeah, we're gonna start by looking at deck here. There isn't too much interesting to talk about in the common module because it's mostly just game logic, but there were just a couple of things I wanted to quickly address. Like, for example, why I do stuff like this enum for the hand index, and I think we also have like a deck index here too. That is, yeah, it's a pretty big enum, and at first I thought like this was not the right choice of a data representation. Like I actually was using U sizes before to index into like the deck and figure out what cards are in the player's hand, that sort of thing. But it was kind of becoming annoying having to like call unwrap all the time, and I generally try to write my code in a very type safe way. Maybe not like to an extreme degree, but I try to make sure that there aren't ways to like pass in invalid inputs in places where you shouldn't be able to do that. And so I ended up creating this big enum for the deck to index into it. And I kind of realized that this actually ended up being a much better representation than I expected, just because of how it's used. There aren't too many places where we actually have to match against it, so you don't get a lot of these big pattern matching blocks, and that's kind of the main reason why it actually works out in the end. But yeah, that was something that I kind of thought was interesting because I just kind of originally went with the U size because it felt like the right thing to do. But numeric data types they're kind of annoying to work with sometimes when you have to worry about edge cases. What else? I want to talk about the board as well. So the board is basically the thing that you saw on the right. If I go back to the screenshot, is this thing. This is the board. a couple of interesting notes about it. I originally went with a two-dimensional array, or I guess not array, but vectors, like just nested vectors. Um, then I learned that that's actually kind of slow. Well, it's not really that slow considering like the size and scale of this project, but apparently that's not like a thing that you should do. Um, so I ended up changing to this structure where you have a width and a height, and then you just have like a one-dimensional vector of board spaces. Apparently, if you nest vectors like this, you can end up slowing down your program by like 10 times because of pointer chasing. So yeah, I ended up just changing to this representation. What else? You might notice I also have this like board position thing. So a board position is supposed to represent a valid position on the board. I didn't have access to anything like, subset types or like dependent types. So I decided I'd try and use like a Haskell style smart constructor for this. It generally works pretty okay. So this tries to make sure that when you construct a board position, it just checks like, is it out of bounds? If so, then it returns an error. Otherwise, it'll actually construct it. The one thing I realized with this is that it has a dependency on the board itself in order to figure out what the width and height are, right? And so what you can end up doing here is you can actually pass in a completely different board when you're constructing a board position, and you can kind of break things. So those safety guarantees are, well, I guess they're not really guarantees. So that's kind of a gotcha here that I didn't really realize until a bit later on, is when you have types that kind of depend on each other in this way, that yeah, you can kind of cause issues with that. There's no way to like prove to the compiler that the board, well, I guess there might be ways to do that actually, but it's not that convenient to prove to the compiler that this board that's being passed in here is the same one, or I guess that this position belongs to the board that you're currently working with. Like you can just give it a different board entirely and just get some nonsense board position. So yeah, that it's kind of a gotcha, but for the most part, this thing works as long as I'm working with a single board, which is pretty much all the time. So I'm not super worried about that. I did originally have this in its own module as well, just to improve encapsulation a bit. But then I realized that it was creating cyclic module dependencies. So there's a dependency on the board module, and the board module will depend on this board position module. And I don't know, I didn't really like that at first. And so I basically just moved this into the board module. And then I realized that that's actually not the worst thing in the world. So it was kind of interesting learning what people think about cyclic module dependencies in Rust, because as far as I know, in like Haskell, for example, you can't have cyclic module dependencies. They're just straight up forbidden. And so what you would do in Haskell is have like a types module, for example, and you'd put all your types there, and then all the functions that operate on those types might live in like another module. So Rust actually consciously makes the decision to allow cycles between modules, and there are some mixed opinions on that from what I found. Like apparently it's a lot more difficult to refactor your code into separate crates if you have modules between, or if you have cycles between your modules. So yeah, that was kind of interesting to learn about, but otherwise they're not too big of an issue. Like looking at some of the more, I guess, well-known projects out there, like RipGrep, for example, I looked through some of the source code there, some of like Burnt Sushi's projects, and there are some module cycles. So yeah, apparently not the worst thing in the world, but if you do it too much, your code can end up turning into spaghetti. So something to be aware of, I guess. So yeah, that's basically all I had to say about the common module. By the way, if you have any questions or any comments, like you have any suggestions, feel free to chime in because, like I said, I don't actually know very much about web development. I'm just kind of learning stuff for the first time here. And I don't know everything about Rust even. I mean, I've been using Rust on and off as like a hobby language for the last 6 or 7 years, and I still, I still don't know everything. So yeah, just feel free to pipe up and yeah, give me any kind of feedback or suggestions you might have on how to improve things if you have ideas. So next, I wanted to go over the back end. So yeah, largely the back end is the same, or maybe not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar to one of the tutorials that they have on the LogRocket website. So yeah, that's kind of the big reason why I ended up using Warp in the first place. So I know like a lot of people don't like Warp now. Like I think they're moving to another framework. I don't remember which one it was. I think it's Axum. Others have come to our meetup and said that you should pretty much always use Actix because Actix Web is kind of the I guess most mature and fast framework out there. But the tutorials were written for Warp, so I ended up picking Warp. I know not the greatest reasoning in the world, but when you're just trying to get something done, and the tutorials are all written using certain tools, sometimes it's just easier to just use what the tutorials are using. So I ended up using Warp, and it isn't the worst thing in the world either. Anyway, yeah. So the main I guess main module here doesn't have too much code here. We just kind of like set up routes, and we have like a WebSocket route and stuff where you can like register your client and all that. Yeah. One thing that I wasn't really sure about is this games hash map here, because I noticed like in the tutorial they're storing all the clients using this RW lock on a hash map, and that's and like I guess that makes sense. You don't want to be able to have data races when you're accessing or when you're mutating this hash map of clients, right? But for the games, I wasn't really sure if it made sense to do this, like to have this RW lock here on like the actual rooms where that players join. Because I guess if there was like a ton of rooms, since this is all async, it'd have to like jump between like processing stuff in each room, and that might slow things down. I don't know. So that's one thing I wasn't really sure of. I don't really work with async a lot, so yeah, that is something that I was maybe a little bit concerned about, especially because this isn't something that was part of the tutorial. It doesn't feel like something that's like tried, tested, and true. So there's that. Yeah, I'm using tracing here to do logging. I'm actually not really done logging here. I haven't set up logs for everything that I want to. So I don't have all the information that I want. This is my first time really using tracing like this as well. Like with this actual like server log. So the way that this is set up is it just writes to log files daily, and yeah, I don't have any kind of like cleanup mechanism. I don't know if there's like a built-in cleanup mechanism in tracing for log files or logs in general. So yeah, that's another thing that I probably will have to look into at some point. So not really not really sure what the best solution is there, or if I have to actually do anything about that. Let me think. So the main logic here is just we have this handler module. This is just used to handle registering clients. It creates like the WebSocket, or it returns like the WebSocket URL here, and then the client can just use that URL to establish a WebSocket connection. So there's nothing like super fancy here. This is all basically what's in the tutorial. I keep going to the wrong place. Sorry, NetRW. Let's see. This is the WebSocket module. So this is where I handle the messages from the client. So yeah, this client message method just basically checks the status of the client. Like if it's in a game, then if it receives a message, it'll execute this logic. It'll basically call game.handle message, and then in the game module, I actually try to process that. Oops. Again, I know there's a way to reset this, but I don't remember how. So yeah, like this is where we keep track of like which state each game is in that the players are playing. Matchmaking is just completely random. Basically, it's like first come first serve. So if you join, if you connect to the server, basically it puts you in like a waiting status, and then the next person who joins gets paired up with whoever's waiting. So yeah, it's completely random. There's no like ELO system. There's no like matchmaking. And yeah, this game module basically takes care of calling the common project's game logic. There might be a little bit more in this module than I would like. That's actually related to the game. Like I feel like some of this stuff could possibly be moved to the common module with the rest of the game logic, but I don't know. But yeah, this is also where we are able to like send messages across the WebSocket to tell the player like, hey, this is the current game state, and yeah, this is what hand you've drawn and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the back end. And now we'll get into the front end stuff. So the front end, kind of a mess, honestly. It's kind of a disaster. I guess I can show what it looks like right now. So I have it open here. And it does kind of work a little bit. Like you can select your card, and that influences like what kind of cursor you have here, right? So you select that card. Now I can like potentially place this card on the board here, but yeah, the actual logic of placing the cards and all that stuff, that's not working. These buttons do nothing right now. This whole UI just looks really ugly. This is my first time using Grid as well, so I had no idea that this this board like subgrid would stretch out the page like this, and then this stuff wouldn't stretch to match that. So apparently there's something there I don't understand about subgrids and CSS, but oh well. Yeah, so there's no WebSocket communication at the moment. I wasn't able to get that working because I don't know, I'm bad. I tried. I tried pretty hard to get that working. But the problem is I followed two different tutorials. Like I said, the first tutorial I was following was only implementing the backend, and so I followed all that, and I think, yeah, I also ended up using the newer version of Vue, 0.2 or 0.20, and I think that might have been from a third tutorial actually. Now that I think about it, I think I looked up like a Vue tutorial. That's how I ended up there, and then the other tutorial, which was like for the full stack application, which I found after the other two tutorials, was using 0.19. And so what ended up happening was the U. So basically, to have the front end communicate with the back end through WebSockets, you have to use agents, as far as I understand it. So there's like this separate U agent. There's this U agent dependency that you can import, and I don't have it here because I just undid everything that I had. I have it on another branch actually, but yeah, the U agent stuff, apparently the API changed between 0.19 and 0.20, which I guess is to be expected. And there's a bunch of stuff in the tutorial that I was following that just didn't exist anymore. I kind of didn't really want to like downgrade after I had already, written all this other stuff up. Like here's the actual components that I have. I'm using function components is the thing. So yeah, if you're familiar with React, the way that U works is it's basically just like React. As far as I can tell, it's basically just React, but you're writing Rust instead. And yeah, I had all these function components. I didn't really want to get rid of them, so I just kind of, yeah, I kind of decided I'll just roll with the newer version and try and figure out how to get the agents working on that version. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to figure that out in time. I have started looking at the examples on the main repo for you, but yeah, otherwise, I don't actually know how that works. And that's why I don't have any WebSocket connections. And that's why I'm very sad. But yeah, other notes, I guess. U seems to make you clone things a lot from what I've noticed. I mean, the state itself has to be immutable, just like in React. And they make you just like state.set, and then you have to pass in like a new state every time. And yeah, like trying to even pass in these callbacks into like as props to your components here. It's yeah, it requires cloning too, as far as I can tell. I wasn't able to borrow them. There might be a way to borrow them and like add like a lifetime to like the props struct, but I think last time I tried that, it did no, that caused like a bunch of other issues. So yeah, that's basically it. The only other, oh yeah, I ran into other problems as well with like cores. I didn't realize that there was like that whole cross-origin resource thing where you can't like establish the WebSocket connection unless unless the backend returns like certain headers. So that was annoying. I had to like figure out how to return the correct headers in in Warp. So that's like a Warp framework thing. I can also show that off, I guess, if I just exit out of this. Just I'll just check out my pane branch. This is where I'm currently at, and stuff is very broken on this branch. But yeah. I think it's just here. Yeah, so the tutorial for some reason didn't have this header here, but you need to add this access control allow origin header. It only had like content type and accept. So that was another pitfall I ran into. Oh yeah, and another pitfall on the front end that I ran into was related to the async calls. When trying to create the WebSocket connection. And basically the solution for async methods is just use this spawn local. I don't even remember where the spawn local comes from. I import it from somewhere. WASM bind gen futures, yeah. And that lets you run the asynchronous code. So yeah, that's basically the entire project. It kind of sucks. I didn't get as far as I'd have liked. I was kind of hoping to have the whole thing hooked up and ready to go, but yeah, trying to follow a bunch of tutorials that were conflicting didn't really help, and I ended up wasting a bunch of time messing with stuff that just is kind of broken and doesn't work. So yeah, aside from finishing this up, I guess I can talk about like future plans with the project. So the actual game that this is based off of allows you to actually like build a deck. What I currently have implemented here is just it randomly draws from a pre-built deck, so you don't get to like choose which cards are in your deck. There's also only one board. It's the one that I showed off here. It's this tall board, but there's other boards. Like in this screenshot, you can see there's like a wider, less tall board. So yeah, adding more of these boards would be nice as well. The base game has card sleeves, which make your cards look fancy. That's not something I'm going to add. I'm also not planning on adding any kind of like ranked matchmaking or whatever, because I don't really know how ELO works. I guess I could figure that out. But also, yeah, figuring out like how to set up like matchmaking servers and all that stuff is like, I don't know, kind of out of scope for now. Maybe like sometime down the line I'll add that as a feature, but yeah, for now, not really thinking about that. Deployment, I haven't really spent any time thinking about deployment at all either. Probably gonna just use Docker and maybe like AWS, I don't know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's all I have for today. Does anyone have any like questions or comments, feedback? Oh, I see there are actually comments in the chat. Sorry, I did not read like anything. Do you use that editor for coding? Yeah, I do. Okay, so like before you all completely maul me, I don't always use just plain old Vim to write Rust. I've used VS Code with like Rust Analyzer. I've used IntelliJ with like the Rust plugin as well. Sometimes when I'm just trying to charge right into a project, I just pop open Vim, and as long as I have Vim key bindings, I kind of just let the Rust compiler take the wheel, you know, like I compile the code, I read through the errors, and then I just fix stuff. And I guess it's a bit slow, but sometimes that's just how I feel like doing things. But yeah, like definitely if you can avoid it, just use an IDE or something else like Rust Analyzer, LSP plugin. It's a lot better. But yeah, you can basically sit me down in front of like any editor that has like Vim key bindings, and I'll be okay with that. I can live with that, and that's kind of why I've done it this way. Also, Clippy is amazing. I love Clippy. Clippy has helped out quite a lot with this project as well. Best linter. There's also a bunch of unit tests as well. I didn't run them. There's like 30 unit tests or so for mostly just the game logic right now, and a little bit of the backend code. I don't have any tests for the front end because God knows I have no idea how to actually test that. I want to add integration tests as well. But yeah, the unit tests were actually pretty helpful. I caught a few bugs in the game logic because I had accidentally messed up the ordering of certain operations, so that was helpful. We got a comment here on Axum. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of posts about Axum, or maybe not a lot of posts, but I read one post where someone was dropping warp for Axum, and they kind of explained why. Axum seems pretty nice. A lot of comments on that blog post were also saying like, yeah, Axum seems a lot better than warp. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm considering switching to as well in the future, or maybe Actix, I guess. Actix is okay, but I've gone into really big fights against actor model in Tokyo in the past. Okay, that's interesting, because I've had people join our meetups in the past, and they've said that Actix is kind of like the way to go if you're doing like a web app in Rust. Like it's mature, it's very established. Um, it's fast. Like it's on like the Tech and Power benchmarks. I think it was like number 1 for a while. I don't know if it still is, but I remember like several years ago it was number 1. So yeah, I know people who just like absolutely swear by Actix. I haven't tried Actix yet, so you know maybe worth trying as well. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad to at least have gotten the experience of trying out yet another web framework aside from Rocket, because the last time I've worked with a web framework, it was Rocket, and yeah, it was kind of interesting to see some of the differences. What's a little bit smoother, what isn't. If it's an RW lock, most of your access should be R, which is pretty close to free. That's probably not a big deal. Okay, true. I guess so. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. React and Rust is very exotic, yes. It is really weird. I have to say, so I knew absolutely nothing about you when I went into this project. I was like, I need to have a front end, but I don't know what to do about that. And the first thing I thought of was I'll just use like TypeScript or something. I don't know. I'll just write up like a front end in TypeScript. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and someone suggested to me actually, why not do it in Rust? I mean, Rust compiles to WebAssembly, right? You could probably just do that. I was just like, okay, you know what? Maybe you have a point. And so I did a little bit of digging into that, and yeah, I learned that yeah, it's kind of nice in some ways because you get to share your types between your front end and your back end, so you can just you reuse the exact same like enums and structs that you have, and you don't have to like worry about like parsing it with a different library or anything in a different language entirely. I'm sure it's not that big of a problem to do so in TypeScript, but it's just a little bit more convenient, right? So that's why um, I ended up going with with the WebAssembly. But yeah, like I'd never used U before. Um, I didn't even know that U compiled to WebAssembly at all, or that it was WebAssembly compatible. I didn't really know what U exactly was, other than like some kind of UI framework. I thought it did native apps, um, and maybe it does also support native apps too. I have no idea, but from what I can tell, it's only WebAssembly. And so when I looked into like how to do a front end in WebAssembly Rust, U was like the first thing that popped up, and I was just like, well, I'll just pick the first thing that pops up because why not? Get to learn something new, try it out, and was very surprised when it just had like these HTML macros that allow you to write like what is like essentially JSX, right? Um, it was basically just React, and then they had like the function components, and they have like the use state hooks, and I was just like, this is literally just React. Um, I don't know how different it is from like the Elm model or whatever, but that was really interesting. And I never really thought something like that was even possible in Rust. Or it never really occurred to me that anyone would do something like that, I guess. So yeah, it was pretty neat, but definitely weird. It's really cool for me to see React and really Elm-like frameworks proliferate so far in Rust because it works well with a memory-safe model. so many weeks of debugging weird Java UI issues just wouldn't have happened were it not for the object-oriented mistake. Yeah, it's interesting what people have been saying about I guess UI design, UI frameworks in Rust. I did recently see another post from someone who was, I think it was actually on Twitter. Someone tweeted that they weren't going to port their um, uh, project to Rust because it didn't support inheritance, and therefore it couldn't do GUI applications at all. And you know, it's just a different way of handling things in Rust. Like when you do GUIs in Rust, you really just have to shift to like this more, I guess, declarative paradigm, more reactive sort of thing rather than using like observers. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting point there. Just it really is just a different paradigm. And it's not exactly like they're like they're wrong for wanting to use object orientation either. Like that's what they're used to. That's what a lot of projects are already based on. A lot of projects are object oriented already, especially GUI applications. And if you want to like port a project to Rust, it can be kind of difficult to do that if you don't have a way to do it kind of this sort of one-to-one transformation of the code, right? You can't just like copy and paste it and then just like change the syntax, right? You have to like actually like, restructure it and use like a different paradigm entirely, and that's kind of it's a bit of a barrier for people, and I think that's a big reason why we have languages like Carbon popping up as well to try and fill in those gaps where you want to use something like Rust that has the memory safety guarantees of Rust, but without as much overhead. And I don't know, yeah, it is definitely an interesting design space and interesting decisions all around there. Personally, I kind of prefer the more declarative frameworks and going with like the more reactive stream approaches, but yeah, to each their own. Another comment here. Deploying Rust to a server is super easy. I built in a Docker container which matches my server, Ubuntu 22.04, and then SCP the binary up, register it to run with systemd, and boom, no crazy deployment stuff. Okay, cool. Actually, might just copy that for later because yeah, I've never deployed anything in Rust before, so that might be useful to note down. Although it sounds like it's going to be pretty simple to get that set up anyway. Clippy is the best code reviewer. True. That looks like an ambitious project. It is good to see that I'm not the only one with programs that balloon into more details than you can handle at one time. Good job tackling it. Thank you. What about Rocket? Yeah, Rocket. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about Rocket at the moment. From what I've used of Rocket, it's definitely pretty usable. For the most part. I did have some weird issues when I was implementing my front end with it, although the front end wasn't it wasn't written in Rust or anything like that. But I was just using like Terra templates. I was using server-side rendering for that one, and some of the errors that were surfacing were really, really unhelpful, or they were just misleading. And to be completely fair to Rocket, it's still just a release candidate, right? It's not they haven't even done like a 1.0 release yet. I know they're gearing up for it. They've been gearing up for it for a very long time. But yeah, I know a lot of people don't like Rocket just purely because it's just it's not ready. The API is still changing. It's still in flux. It's been like this for a very long time, to the point now that it almost kind of feels dated. Even though they are still updating it regularly, and yeah, just there aren't a lot of stability guarantees there. So I don't know. But Rocket does seem pretty type safe. I do like the I guess procedural macro based approach to like constraining like um, inputs and stuff like that. Like that's pretty neat. I think my Rocket application that I wrote last time ended up being more code than the Warp one though, as well. So that's if you're someone who cares about like code size and like um, you know, surface area for bugs and all that, then it might not be it might not be as nice. But yeah, the reason why I didn't use Rocket for this application though is because A, wanted to try something new, and B, all the tutorials were written in Warp. So yeah. Last experience with Rust a couple months ago was a desktop app with Tori. Tori lets you do UI as a regular web app with a standard lib React. Never tried WebAssembly. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what Tori really is, to be honest. I've heard about it in passing through some conversations, but I, to be honest, I don't really know much about it. It just sounds like uh, I guess like sort of like a React Native sort of thing. I don't know. It just makes you it allows you to make desktop apps. But yeah, I have no idea. So unless there are any other questions, then yeah, that concludes my my little show and tell. Um, is there anything that anyone here wants to talk about at all, or shall we end the meetup? You're muted, by the way, Evgeny, in case you didn't want to be muted.
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
I-
Well, I do have one little thing that I wanted to just quickly paste in here. So this is something that I saw just the other day, and I thought it was kind of interesting. It's this little YouTube video here. It's showing the I think most popular programming languages over time from 1965 to 2022, and at the end of the video, they actually show Rust in top 10, which is interesting to me because I still don't think of it as a top 10 language at all, like in terms of popularity. So it's interesting to see that by some metrics, somehow Rust has ended up being a top 10 most popular language. Now, I don't know what metrics they're using to calculate this, which is another thing that kind of makes me feel kind of like kind of iffy about this. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that this is a thing that exists and that, yeah, apparently some people, by some measure, think that Rust is actually in the top 10 in terms of popularity. So I guess we'll see if growth continues, and yeah, hopefully Rust will be at least popular enough so that I can actually work with it. At least that's what I would like. Yeah, any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. That was great.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for coming. So yeah, plans for next month. Probably just gonna be a more quiet meetup. Well, maybe not more quiet. We usually have like a pretty big influx of people in January, I would say. But it's not going to have a presentation. We don't have anyone lined up. As far as I know, nobody is interested in doing a talk on anything Rust related right now, or at least if they are, they haven't reached out to me about it. So it'll probably be another free discussion. And um, oh, someone just joined. Yeah, it'll be a free discussion. So we'll probably just be trying to help people out, answer their questions, the usual. Same as like what we did last month, where I think yeah we had someone join and he basically spent the entire time debugging their issues and stuff, and it was fun. That's kind of the whole point of these sessions because people feel like there isn't enough time when we do like an actual talk to actually, ask questions and like raise issues with their projects and have other people help out. And I've been trying to do a better job of giving people that time and space to do that. I did get a couple of complaints about that. So yeah, I'm trying to to help people out there. But yeah, and hello Edmundo. You're joining kind of at the tail end of our meetup. So yeah, we're about to wrap up here, unless you have any like questions or anything that you want to bring up. Okay, I'm going to assume not. So yeah, if any of you have a topic that you want to talk about related to Rust, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached on meetup.com through the messaging system, or you can just send an email to jonathanrlouis@gmail.com. And yeah, I'll try and schedule you in. Note that we'll be trying to keep it relatively light this year with the presentations, or maybe not light, but lighter than previous years. I'm trying to do like an every other month we have a presentation instead of every single month, because I think we were burning through presentations very quickly. I kind of got really tired of it. Other people got tired of it, and yeah, that wasn't a very healthy pacing. And so yeah, we're gonna try and spread them out a little bit more this year. But yeah, that's it. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you all hopefully next month. All right.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.